Yeah, my name is Maxi Bergel. I'm a postdoc researcher at the University of Rostock. I guess my last English presentation is about 3 years ago, so please excuse my bad wording, my pronunciation, and be patient with me. Welcome to this session when tourists don't walk, they talk. But first of all, what is this presentation about? Well, consumers are paying increasing attention towards sustainable products, services such as ecological food, ethically produced clothes, or touristic offers. The tourism industry can, on the one hand, lead to a global paradigm shift, but at the same time causes serious negative ecological as well as ethical impacts. However, a shift towards sustainable tourism can only be achieved by consumers' participation. But nevertheless, there is still a gap between consumers' intention and actual behavior. So in this session, we will take a look on tourists' behavioral barriers and investigate possible reasons and ways to overcome those barriers. But first, full disclosure, today's topic and this presentation are part of a research project that is supported by funds of the Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection. We aim to investigate, as said, consumption barriers of sustainable services and hope to find measures and/or digital tools to overcome them. But why? Well, nothing new to you, I guess. Facing global challenges such as poverty, climate change, global inequality, and unfortunately more present than ever, political instability, we need to recognize and address the underlying interdependencies. Yeah. The global economic growth and increasing population leads to stress on the ecosystem and is on the same time highlighting an increasing importance of global ecological, economic, and social thinking and action. Since not only the challenges, but also the solutions need to be considered globally and holistically, the UN Agenda 2030 is intended to represent a new global development consensus that includes targets of sustainable development. Within the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, of the UN Agenda 2030, tourism is identified as a potential driver for achieving these goals. Not only has the tourism, as I already said, the economic relevance to introduce real change, it also causes a lot of negative impact and therefore has high potentials for improvement and transformation. Tourism as an economic powerhouse is the third highest world category in export earnings, representing 10% of the GDP, 30% of services exports, and 1 out of every 10 jobs in the world. Tourism has the potential to contribute directly or indirectly to all of the goals of the UN Agenda 2030. And in particular, it has been included in targets in the goals 6, 8, 12, 13, and 14. I would like to take a closer look at them. So, Sustainable Development Goal 6 targets at clean water, sanitation, and sustainable management of water. Tourism can play a critical role in achieving water access and security, as well as hygiene and sanitation for all. Depending on the comfort class, the average tourist consumes up to 500 liters per night, while the average consumption at home amounts 120 liters. The indirect water consumption, taking into account transportation, catering, energy, etc., totals up to 12,000 liters of water. The efficient use of water in the tourism sector, coupled with appropriate safety measures, wastewater management, pollution control, technology efficiency, can be a key to safeguarding our most precious resource. So, to sum it up, it is necessary to improve the direct and indirect water consumption in tourism. This can be done by efficient investments in corresponding technologies, certification guidelines and processes, prevention through education, and so on. Sustainable Development Goal 8 targets a decent work and targets decent work and economic growth. So tourism, as I already told you, is one of the driving forces of global economic growth and currently provides for 1 out of 10 jobs worldwide. By giving access to decent work opportunities in the tourism sector, society, particularly youth and women, can benefit from increasing skills and professional development. The sector's contribution to job creation is recognized in Target 8 by 2030 devise and implement policies to promote sustainable tourism that creates jobs and promotes local culture and products. So this covers inclusion in the labor market, vocational training, and the protection of workers' rights. And to promote sustainable tourism that creates those jobs and promotes a local culture and products, it is important for at least 330 million employees worldwide. The worldwide gross domestic product counts for 10%. So the tourism industry can and should be a driver for more and better employment. What the tourism industry needs to get this done for are a decent diversity management, incentives for companies as well as for employees, vocational education, and especially a local recruitment. Let's get to Sustainable Development Goal 12 that contains a comprehensive catalogue of measures to ensure sustainable production and consumption patterns. So it includes the realization of the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production patterns, the sustainable management of natural resources, the handling of chemicals, recycling, corporate responsibility, public procurement, and education for sustainable development. A tourism sector that adopts sustainable consumption and production practices can play a significant role in accelerating the global shift towards sustainability. To do so, as set in Goal 12, it is imperative to development and implement tools to monitor sustainable development impacts for sustainable tourism, which creates jobs, promotes local cultures and products. The Sustainable Tourism Program within this framework aims at developing such consumption and production practices, including resource-efficient initiatives that result in enhanced economic, social, and environment outcomes. Therefore, it is important to conserve resources as well as fostering socially responsible and economic consumption patterns. It is necessary to strengthen a sustainable tourism in order to create and promote those jobs I already talked about, as well as a local culture and products, and to develop potentials for regional and national tourism systematically and responsibly. In order to consider social and ecological negative effects, for example, of mass tourism, the industry needs to establish, again, control mechanisms and sustainability indicators. Further measures to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 12 may be investments in sustainable technology, waste management, a certain stay local culture, guest participation, certification programs, and so on. SDG 13 targets at what the vast majority considers to be sustainability, climate protection. It highlights the importance of immediate action in order to fight climate change and its impact. Facing an Earth overshoot day earlier and earlier each year, tourism can play a critical role in reducing our carbon footprint. Tourism contributes to and is also affected by climate change. It is therefore in the sector's own interest to play a leading role in the global response to climate change. By lowering, for example, energy consumption and shifting towards renewable energy sources, especially when it comes to transport and mobility and accommodation, tourism can help to tackle one of the most pressing challenges of our time. But also the private sector can shape tourism to contribute to climate change mitigation. Again, measures to achieve these goals are certification, renewable energy, waste management, ecosystem protection, compensation paying, offsetting, and so on. The last goal I would like to highlight within our project or our session today is SDG 14, which aims at life below water, as oceans and seas account for 70% of Earth's surface, and more than 500 million people make their living out of fishing. So coastal and maritime tourism's biggest segment, rely on healthy marine ecosystems. Again, it is in the sector's own interest to protect this ecosystem. So tourism development must be a part of integrated coastal zone management in order to help conserve and preserve fragile marine ecosystems and serve as a vehicle to promote a blue economy in line with this target. 2, increase the economic benefits from the sustainable use of marine resources, including through sustainable management of fishery, aquaculture, and tourism by 2030. So the main challenges in this sector are acidification, littering, oil extraction, manganese mining, just to name a few. And the tourism can face those challenges by efficient waste management, protection of the wildlife and environment, compensations, and again, prevention through education. So for this summer school and our research team, the topic of sustainable tourism is of special interest. On the one hand, is Germany the 3rd largest touristic sending market. On the other hand, Mecklenburg-Pomerania is the most popular domestic tourist destination for Germans, and sustainability concepts can represent an important competitive factor. So what do we already know about sustainable consumption? I think you already heard a lot about technologies, agriculture, and so on. But what is probably not surprising for you is that there is a noticeable growing environmental awareness, ecological convictions, and a desire for sustainability within the society and within this group, obviously. So, but research shows that what the practice has already felt a long time. There is a positive attitude, and the intention, they do often not translate into corresponding behavior. It seems there is a notable gap between reported intentions and actual behavior. Following the theory of planned behavior, one's beliefs can be linked to his behavior. So the theory maintains that 3 components, namely attitude, subjective norms, and perceived behavioral control, together shape an individual's behavior intentions. In turn, the tenet of the theory of planned behavior is that behavioral intention is the most important determinant of human social behavior. Perceived behavior control represents a measure of the feasibility of the behavior. Subjective norms reflect the acceptance of the intended behavior within society and reference groups, whereas the attitude represents evaluation of the advantageousness of this behavior. Accordingly, if the 3 constructs are positive, a high level of sustainable behavioral intention should prevail, which would be then translated into actual consumption behavior of sustainable products and services. The theory we were talking about now was elaborated by Isaac Eitzen and has been applied to studies of the relations among beliefs, attitudes, and intentions and behavior in various human domains like advertising, public relations, healthcare, sport management, and sustainability. Some researchers now suggest to extend the model by taking into account one's individual knowledge about an attitude object, as well as situational factors such as physical environment, time-related characteristics, social environment, mood, or, for example, point of sale information. So it seems obvious that intention and behavioral control are not sufficient predictors of behavior. There seems to be something between these factors. And as I already said, situational context factors might be intervening, representing behavioral barriers. Some years ago, we focused our research on the consumption of ethical and ecological food. So what we did was, at a supermarket, we asked consumers, what is your attitude towards ecological food? Do you intend to buy ecological food today? After they noted their intention, their attitude towards ecological food, ethical produced food, they went shopping. And we had some weeks with no control measures. They just went shopping, and afterwards we checked their carts and it was like, okay, so you told us you have a high intention on buying ecological food, but you didn't. And some other weeks we gave them information, point of sale information about how important it is to buy ecological food, how healthy it may be to buy ecological food, and what you can achieve by buying ecological food. And within these weeks, there was a significant increase in ecological foods in the shopping cart. So, point of sale information were the key. Besides social influence and personal habits, we could prove that missing information and communication deficits can lead to behavioral barriers when it comes to a sustainable intention behavior gap. When this gap is so apparent in the product sector, it must be even more crucial in the service sector, where information asymmetries are basically inherent. What brings us to the sustainable tourism services. But what is actually sustainable tourism? What do we mean by sustainable tourism services? The World Tourism Organization defines sustainable tourism as tourism that makes full account of its current and future economic, social, and environmental impacts, addressing the needs of visitors, the industry, the environment, and host communities. Basically, we have to say there is no such thing as sustainable tourism. We'll always leave a trace, a footprint, anything. But I hope we can all agree on sustainable tourism as a responsible and at least more sustainable way of tourism and traveling. So, following WTO's definition, corresponding services meet the, I guess in this summer school well-known, triple bottom line measures. Sustainable tourism actors, their businesses, their services are geared at, for example, conserving resources, the use of renewable energies, and giving preference to regional products. Sorry, have a look at the time. Yeah. They further promote environmental projects, encourage qualitative and substantial growth, respect the interests and rights of their employees, promote and respect diversity, just to name a few aspects. And besides the positive effects on the local population, value creation, and the domestic labor market, sustainable tourism has another plus point. Sustainable destinations attract sustainable, responsible, acting tourists, who are also usually known for a high willingness to pay. So to sum it up, examples for sustainable tourism services are locally owned accommodations and restaurants, local food and souvenir, fair trade products, shops that promote fair trade products, and so on, public transportation, bicycle transport, carbon dioxide compensations, interactions with locals, like, I don't know if you know Airbnb community, where you can show your hometown to the community, resource conserving behavior, certifications, and so on. I guess you won't be surprised when I say that the earlier explained intention behavior gap is also well known in the travel context. While about 70% of tourists claim that sustainability is important to them, and that they would like to travel more sustainable, only 3 to 7% act accordingly. So a big challenge of the touristic context, besides the intention behavior gap, is a certain at-home away gap. People might behave pretty sustainable while at home in the familiar environment, but They forget about all their good habits and intentions while they're traveling, as behavioral changes experience even less acceptance in hedonistic vacation context. But at least there are positive relationships between behaviors in both contexts, and we can observe a certain carryover effect, like people who behave sustainable at home might not act accordingly on vacation, but at least they travel more sustainable than, let's call them, conventional tourists. Possible reasons might be individual barriers, a lack of alternatives, a lifestyle, like sustainability is seemingly not too Instagrammable, compensation, psychological compensation costs, like you don't want to deal with difficult topics and decisions. But another reason is comparable to results from product-oriented research. Initial work identifies inefficient communication along the whole customer journey. And this is crucial as information creates transparency, connectedness, credibility, commitment to a certain destination, a certain behavior, and so on. So to communicate the communication of sustainability and its added value, as well as the development of corresponding communication strategies, has the potential to transform environmentally conscious intentions into corresponding behaviors, and thus also lead to more sustainable tourism. But what's the problem? What's missing? Tourists as well as tourism experts support the mind behavior gap, the attention behavior gap I already told you about. It seems further that sustainability is primarily seen in connection with nature, environmental and resource conversation. Like every time we ask someone, what do you think sustainability is? Everybody talks to us about climate change, resource conservation, and so on. There is obviously a lack of a uniform understanding of sustainability, what seems to be a communication problem. People tell us, tourists tell us that there is a willingness to pay, they are willing to pay more for a sustainable holiday than for a conventional holiday, but they miss the relevant information. And if there are relevant information, they cannot find them. So there's also a lack of good presentation of sustainability information. It is also necessary to communicate indicators, like sustainability seems to have a bad image, it's something you don't want to think about, it's something very serious, and don't call the child sustainability, call it resource convention, social impact, and so on. Tourists as well as tourism managers notice a certain skepticism and fear of greenwashing, credibility. They don't see the benefits of sustainable tourism and so on. So what they wish for are digital communication measures. And what I wish for is that you take turn now. Let's consider you want your next journey, your day trip, your city break, your long distance travel, etc., to be more sustainable. Which aspects of sustainability are particularly relevant to you? Which indicators could be a reason to buy, book, visit? And what kind of information do you need to behave, to decide for or against a destination, an attraction, a way of mobility, etc.? How would you be convinced to behave more sustainable? How would you love to receive the relevant information, and what's important before, during, and after the trip? So I was actually hoping for some more attendees to divide you into breakout rooms. I guess we'll do that nevertheless. I prepared some murals. I don't know if you already worked with mural. Here you have the possibility to zoom in, wander around, zoom out, take a sticky note like this one, and write down what is important for you? What kind of information is important for you? What information do you need? So would be wonderful if you'd brainstorm within your breakout rooms. I'll share the mural link with you. Let's have a look at the results in 5 to 10 minutes, maybe. Welcome back. Unfortunately, we lost some attendees, but those who stayed with us did good work. So let's take a look at what the others considered to be important before and after the travel that might be interesting for all of you. For example, one of you wrote that the information needed, I need to know, is the place where am I traveling safe, right? Does it cut my budget? Will it be much more expensive that I can't buy anything? Or will it be cheap, and so on? So it's all about the price, which seems to be important. We have the same here. You say that the price and the lack of information might hinder you to travel more sustainable. If the place has bad ecological, you will most likely dislike it because everyone loves nature, mountains, rivers. But okay, now I know. If the locals there are mean to you and maybe try to make it happen, yeah, that's right. It's very important that tourism needs a certain acceptance within the local region, and it's something that goes from both sides. Like you want the locals to be nice to you, so on the other hand, you need to be nice to the locals, right? There's a German saying, when traveling to Rome, act like Romans. So what do we have else? I have to rely on the information. That was a hint I gave to you right before you travel. You have to rely on the information of others. So information is something very important before you travel, because you're not there. You can't have the proof. It's a service. It's something you have to rely on. This is something I really like. The best way to communicate is honestly and openly. Yeah. And you have to live what you communicate, especially when it comes to sustainability and sustainable tourism. Way channels, devices to inform, normal phone messages, video calls, applications. Okay, dope. That's interesting. Let's see, what do we have here? A blank sticky note, all right. Mobile phone app that might help planning. What is important to you? What needs to be very sustainable depending on the experience I want to make? Do I want to see attractions? Yeah. But nevertheless, any holiday can be sustainable, can be more sustainable. It depends on how you go there. What mobility do you use? Do you buy your coffee at, let's say, Starbucks or a local seller, and so on? It's very interesting. I hope you like the mural stuff, to work with it. What do we have while we travel? So we're at the location, we can't go back. We're already there. We might not know the environment, the facilities there, so we need to inform us. Okay, those are blank sticky notes. What hinders me? Price, missing opportunities. So again, it's the price that might hinder me to behave more sustainable. Little spoiler alert. Actually, sustainable holiday doesn't have to be more pricey. Of course, there is a difference between the all-inclusive Mallorca club resort holiday and a sustainable travel journey, whatever. But for example, depending on the hotel you book, the restaurant you choose, the mobility way you use, there isn't actually not a big price difference. Often, not always. So what are the information you need when you are at your travel? They need to be credible, authentic, I guess. Recycling, local offers, yes. So we need to know what are the local offers. How should we give them to you, those offers, channels, apps, Instagram, influencer, tourist offer, apps. So mobile devices seem to be something pretty common, pretty important. Official tourism sites, and okay, yeah, of course. When you're already there, you use the tourism information. Social media of the location, again, social media and mobile devices. Good to know if there are any fines for littering, not recycling, and so on. Yeah, that's important, of course. I guess when going to Bangkok, it can be very, very pricey, littering, right? It's the same when here in Rostock you feed the Baltic birds. There's a high fine on that. So a good infrastructure is important to ensure a more sustainable journey within the country city. Yeah, that's right. Especially when you come to Mecklenburg-Pomerania, there's sometimes not the best infrastructure to travel through the country. That makes it hard to travel sustainable. If there is no train, you can't use the train, so you will always get back to the car, of course. I prefer locations that do not use single-use plastic. It's forbidden, right, in Germany. So interesting how you always talk about the price and how both groups see mobile devices and apps as a possible help to travel more sustainable. Here we have someone typing, still typing. Tourism must be sustainable without alternatives for, yeah, I come back to that. Yeah, shouldn't be only in advertising. Perfect, that's it. That's what I already said. You need to live what you communicate, right? After your journey, what's special for this stage of customer journey? It's hard to get in touch with each other. It's after the journey, everything happened. Again, the costs, ecological instability to maintain, keep something for a longer period without depreciation. Yeah, right, that's what is sustainability and why, and look at, yeah, that's what we already talked about. You're not the only one. It's hard to catch what is sustainability actually. I'd like to try local food customs. So you need the information about local foods customs, apps, web pages as information sources. So here we have something, rewards or penalties, both with stronger focus on rewards. So get rewarded for acting sustainability during your holiday, before your holiday, when planning after your holiday, and so on. I tell you something about that right now. Great, I thank you very much for working with me on this small project. Yep. So you already showed that digitalisation is something that matters. There are sustainable tourism services and offers, but there's often a lack of visibility, credibility, etc. Sustainability information needs to be target group oriented. It needs to be easy to understand. It should be taken for granted. And one of you already said it, sustainability needs to become the new normal. Sustainability needs to become something habitual. Like the more often you buy ecological vegetables or vegetarian alternatives, or the more regular, for example, you're doing sports, the more normal and therefore easy it's becoming for you. You don't have to make a thoughtful decision. It's just a habit, like brushing teeth. And it rather should be eye-catching when something is not sustainable, when sustainability information is missing, or when a product or service is not as sustainable as it could be possible. So it needs to become more easy to live, or in our case travel sustainable. And what could be possible solutions, for example, as you already showed us, mobile devices. We have a certain ease of use, we have leveraging habits, it's permanently available. So the information on this mobile device will be permanently available. There's a possibility of co-creation, of where you, like with community-based informations that supports a certain customer engagement. Customer engagement leads to more satisfaction, leads to more trust, leads to more commitment to sustainability, to the destination, and so on. We have the possibility to enhance the trust and the behavioral change. What we were thinking about are gamification and reward-based nudging for sustainable consumption. That could be, for example, something like a hotel app rewarding you for a certain behavior, for conserving energy, for conserving water, and so on. That could be an app that transforms the carbon dioxide to you into something that you really can understand. Like, okay, you saved as much energy as, I don't know, 2 hours of television, something like that. Instead of saying that was 2 kilograms of carbon dioxide, something like that. Yep. So we are doing some experiments right now within this project in order to prove if rewards might be the best measure to convince people to behave more sustainable when on journeys, when traveling. Plus, if apps are the best way to inform people. We already found out that connectiveness is something very, very important. Like you already wrote in the murals, you have tourism information, and you have like booking platforms, and it would be great if they work together, if they are connected with each other. So let's come to an end. I guess I stretched the time a little. Nevertheless, I thank you for your attention. I hope there's still some room for questions. If you want a further read, screenshot this page. So this is the whole literature I used for today's session, and probably that may be interesting to you. Again, sorry for stretching the time. Sorry for using you for a little work. I hope you had the feeling that was more interactive than just a presentation. And if there are still any questions, I'm open to hear them. If you want to discuss something, if you have something in mind where you say, okay, stop, Maxi, you really need to consider that, blah, blah, blah. I'm happy to hear or to read.
Thank you so much for that. I thought that was really interesting to think about different aspects. I think it's very true. There's a lot of information missing about what is sustainable and what might be sustainable, sustainable alternatives. And like you say, I think for me personally, I think even with shopping, not just tourism, but generally, buying organic, for example, has always been more expensive, or that's at least the perception that I have, and that's being sold, that buying organic and eating, being vegetarian or vegan is more expensive than normal, normal consumption behaviors. Yeah.
You already said it, it's your perception, right? Of course, you can't compare the best ecological meat with the worst and most cheap meat, yeah. But a good produced meat and ecological meat is pretty comparable with the price. There's no such big deal. Of course, it's nothing for everyone, and I know it's a privilege to talk about sustainable behavior when traveling, to talk about ecological food and so on. But nevertheless, it's, as you already said, it's your perception, and there's always a way of behaving more sustainable when on holiday. We found that there are a lot of tourists who perceive that when they're on holiday, it's not my water, it's not my energy, I already paid for it with the hotel. So, but morally, you didn't pay for it, right?
Sure. Do you find that as well when talking to people doing your research, that there is a sort of, that people are developing a bit of a distrust behind the labels that are out there, like organic foods?
It's not actually distrust against labels, it's more something like, I don't know what this label stands for. Like there are so much labels, and what's the difference between all these labels? So what we consider is something supported by the government, like co-branded by the government, one label, not 100 labels for this aspect of sustainability and this aspect of sustainable, or something like, you know, like colored green, yellow, orange, red for a degree of sustainability. There's a very interesting question in the chat I'd like to discuss. So I think that regulation businesses and enforcing sustainable choices would have a greater effect than individuals' behavior change. Would you agree? If not, why not? So on the one hand, I can agree. 100, the most again, 70% of carbon dioxide emission worldwide is produced by 100 companies. So of course we need to regulate businesses and so on. But on the other hand, your individual choice, your individual behavior is something that gives an alarm signal, like if you demand for more sustainable holidays, if you demand for more sustainable products and services, industry, businesses will be forced to supply them. And as long as the individual, the customer, the tourist doesn't demand for more sustainable products and services, why should the industry supply them? On the other hand, it's the industry that can lead us to a more sustainable behavior by forcing us to buy more sustainable. When there is no conventional meat, when there is no mass tourism, when there is no elephant riding in Thailand, whatever, then we can't buy those not sustainable products and services. So I think that goes together, and the most important measure may be regulation, like government regulation. Yeah, so I can agree and I cannot agree. So we all have our impact, we all have our tasks, and we should be aware of this impact. Thanks for the question. That's a very good point. We heard in another presentation that tourism can never really be sustainable. Do you agree with it, or do you think the measurements you mentioned would be an opportunity to make tourism possible in a sustainable way? I already had that in my presentation. I agree, there is no such thing as sustainable tourism in a form that doesn't leave a trace. We will always leave a trace. Tourism always has an impact. Tourism is always combined with moving, with mobility, and with carbon dioxide emission and so on. But we should agree on a more responsible way of tourism, on a way of tourism that is as sustainable as possible. And maybe there is a form of tourism that has a positive impact, like bringing communities to a higher growth, economical growth, but substantially, sorry. So actually, I have to agree, there is no such thing as sustainable tourism, unfortunately. But doesn't mean we shouldn't travel, right? At least traveling is some sort of education. Highlighting awareness and so on, increasing awareness for nature. But thanks for the question, Alexandra. So, perfect. I hope you had fun with this presentation, with this session. I hope you learned something. It was not as technical as of some of the other speeches, I guess. When I read the schedule, it's very technical, right? A lot of engineering, yeah. So maybe I could give you another view on sustainability out of a marketinger's eye.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here, for being part of this. I think it's that's what makes this week really, really interesting, is just having lots of different aspects of sustainability come together. And yes, some of the talks were very chemistry detailed, heavy, and some of it is very different. But I think that's part of highlighting how big sustainability really is and how it affects all parts of life, really. So thank you so much for being part of this. It's really great. And thank you so much for your presentation and the activity. I think that was really, really interesting.
I have to thank the attendees that taking part in our research and not leaving me for this little task. Nevertheless, if you have the need to contact me, want more information on the project, want more information on sustainable tourism, please don't hesitate to contact me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.